Hello world, I'm Dr. Jagtap, and in this video we will review the neuroscience of Ethereum in the context of active inference because that'll help us understand how Ethereum and the nervous system might be modeling each other in real time. This idea comes from systems neuroscience and helps us to make sense of these coincidences that I began to notice as I came to learn about Ethereum, the human brain, and the human psyche. How could things be so similar? So down the rabbit hole I went, and I emerged with patterns, so I had to resolve my uncertainty. Beyond fractal patterns that repeat through space and time, could there be a deeper meaning to these rhymes? So that led me to active inference and also the ether, because that is how Vitalik Buterin decided to name Ethereum, based on the ether, which is the luminiferous ether, the hypothetical medium that was thought to transmit light. And then eventually we came to understand this ether as the electromagnetic spectrum transmitting waves of all kinds. And then in the 1940s, as the field of IT was born, it was also uncovered to be a communication channel through which information propagates. Zooming out, we see that this channel is part of a broader communication system with different components. For example, this video is the information source, and you are the destination. Audio signals are transmitted through speakers and received by the ears. Similarly, visual information is transmitted from the screen to the eyes, and our brain makes sense of what we are seeing. So it's not only the visible light spectrum waves entering our eyes that enable us to see what we see. No, that would simply mean that we are just seeing colors. We are seeing far more than that. We have contour detections, we have depth perception, we have a rich visual field, and that is because our brain is continuously processing incoming information. It is decoding a signal by filtering out the noise, and this is happening with all 5 of our senses. The question of how is addressed by active inference. Active inference is a way of understanding sentient behavior. In this title of the same name, it is summarized as a theory that characterizes perception, planning, and action in terms of probabilistic inference. So that's a lot of P's, but essentially active inference is about prediction. How do living organisms predict, and how do sentient systems behave? Guided by the free energy principle, active inference is based on the premise that living organisms strive to maintain a relative order, or negative entropy, controllability, and predictability, despite being immersed in an environment whose natural forces generate continuous fluctuations and a never-ending threat of entropic erosion. So stated another way, the behavior of a living organism, sentient behavior, will lead it to predict the world in the best way that it can. And these predictions are probabilistic inferences, which are guided by perception, planning, and action. So that means the prediction is an active inference. Fundamentally, these predictions are a function of the ability and capacity to maintain a relative order, or negative entropy, against a never-ending threat of entropic erosion. This may seem technical and complex, but it becomes intuitive when we understand that this all boils down to entropy. Because there is no concept in the whole field of physics that is more difficult to understand than entropy. And nor is there one which is more fundamental, the physicist Francis Sears has said. So let's have a look. In the physical sciences, entropy is a measure of molecular disorder or randomness, and the higher the entropy, the greater the disorder. Naturally, a substance in its solid phase will go from lower entropy to higher entropy as it melts into a liquid. This disorder, or entropy, in the universe is always increasing per the second law of thermodynamics, meaning, for example, our rooms are likely to become untidy simply as a function of time. Thank you, entropy. In contrast to this physical disorganization, in the field of information theory, entropy characterizes probability distributions and the incompleteness of our knowledge pertaining to a system. So let's consider the coin flip. We get either a heads or a tails, so the probability distribution reports a binary outcome. This outcome can be designated as 0 or 1, giving us a binary digit, and so this event has an information entropy of 1 binary digit per flip. In contrast, if the outcome is known in advance, as it is for this coin with both heads on both sides, then the outcome is certain. There remains no uncertainty, and the information entropy is 0 bits per flip. So to summarize, entropy entails physical disorganization in the biological sciences, but represents statistical randomness or probabilistic uncertainty in information theory. And entropy is increasing everywhere except inside of living organisms, because life reverses entropy. Whereas entropy in the universe is always increasing, living organisms are always decreasing entropy. So this tendency for disorganization or disorder tends to spread everywhere, including inside of living systems. And in turn, life will instill order by decreasing internal entropy, resulting in an opposite and additive effect on total universe entropy. Living systems reverse entropy via self-organization. Basic building blocks of life assemble into things greater than the sum of their parts, such as the primary structure of proteins comprised of amino acids, folding into the secondary structure, which then folds into the tertiary structure and ultimately a fully functional protein. And zooming out, we see our hierarchy of life, as neurons organize into brain regions, and brain regions organize further into networks. So this applies to all things physical and material within living systems. But what about information entropy? How is this reversed? And if we can't visualize it, then what exactly is reversed? Free energy, according to the free energy principle. Much like life reduces entropy, the free energy principle states that any self-organizing system that is at equilibrium with its environment must minimize its free energy. It mathematically states how life resists disorder. So though there may be numerous technical nuances, if we trust the math, as we trust the code of the Ethereum blockchain, then we can conceptualize for practical purposes that free energy is similar to entropy. Because free energy can be conceptualized as the amount of energy that is free or available for work inside of any given system, some of which will always dissipate due to entropy and the tendency towards disorganization. And in the context of active inference, or making predictions, minimizing free energy entails minimizing surprise, or placing an upper bound on surprise, which is another way of saying that prediction errors are minimized. And that is because a special kind of free energy is minimized. And it is known as variational free energy. It is an information theory quantity derived employing Bayesian statistics. As such, it uses Bayes' theorem. This is used widely in AI and machine learning because the theorem factors into account previously known information, including the likelihood, new incoming data, and the prior beliefs before accounting for new evidence. The output is a posterior distribution. In statistics, a distribution is a set of values which can be graphed, so there can be many, such as the normal and exponential distributions. So the posterior distribution is a set of probabilities after accounting for previously known information. The posterior distribution often ends up becoming the prior in systems which repeatedly carry out Bayesian updating, such as the nervous system, which updates in response to incoming information as neurons fire on the order of milliseconds and cellular processes unfold on the order of microseconds to generate our models of the world. We will revisit this later, but the main point here is that the posterior distribution will always have a margin of error due to information entropy. So variational free energy can be understood in this context of making predictions as the uncertainty that will always exist due to information entropy. Relating it to the figure from earlier, our predictions and uncertainty about the world, variational free energy, is minimized such that internal states are approximated to external states as closely as possible. That is, our model of the world, represented by internal states, is generated to approximate the world as closely as possible. Technically, variational free energy is described as an upper bound on negative log evidence, which is equal to surprise. But what log evidence is this referring to? It is referring to model evidence, and more specifically, evidence for the model of the world. There are two ways to minimize discrepancies between the world and the model of the world. One is through perception, which can be thought of as a bottom-up process. And the other is action, which entails top-down processes such as intention, planning, incentives, and the expectations that lead us to act. In contrast, outcomes and observations are outside of us, as we are separated by a statistical barrier known as the Markov blanket. But because only action and perception are within our control, sentient behavior is set to unfold through the action-perception loop, which is a core component of active inference. So with respect to taking action, minimizing free energy is akin to minimizing prediction errors or surprise about the world, about the future. In contrast, with respect to perception, minimizing free energy entails maximizing model evidence, which is done by way of self-evidencing. So when internal states cast their posterior distributions onto sensory states, the result is a probabilistic representation of external states. And this is next adopted by internal states in order to generate our model of the world. Meaning, statistical values distribute in such a way that internal states represent coordinates of external states in space and time, because that is the point at where a thermodynamic non-equilibrium steady state is attained as variational free energy is minimized. That is to say, model evidence is greatest when we structurally model the world. Materially and physically, we appreciate this symmetry in the dendrites of neurons as they sprout roots to receive as many signals as possible, much like the roots of our trees that anchor into the ground to absorb as many nutrients as possible. The vast interconnectivity of trees, fine roots, and mycelial networks lays a strong foundation for our biological ecosystems to flourish, and this too is modeled by the unfathomable complexity of 86 billion neurons connecting over a quadrillion synapses. From these foundations emerged the hierarchy of nature, and our biology as well. Scaled in this way, this symmetry does not seem coincidental. The universe is rarely so lazy for coincidences, says Sherlock. Indeed, there are no coincidences, only correlations for which we do not yet know the explanation. Not everything needs a reason, but very importantly, it should be highlighted how variational free energy applies also to processes that change a system's belief states, and not just the particles of the body, meaning we also observe functional modeling of the world. This is so because living organisms are non-equilibrium steady-state systems that continuously exchange information with the environment flowing in through the ether, meaning we model the way information and value flows in the world and in nature. And so it's no surprise that individuals around the world are migrating to the one place where they are free to transact with each other, and that place is Ethereum. Thanks for watching.